Elin Miller.
Elin Miller, board member, farmer from Umpqua, Oregon.
Eric Oram.
Eric Oram, board member and farmer from Heppner, Oregon.
Luisa Santa Maria.
Luisa Santa Maria, public member, extension and education at OSU.
Randy Svati.
Randy Savati, Farmer, Ontario.
Josh Zielinski.
I'm Josh Zielinski, farmer from Salem, Oregon.
Dean Semenich.
Stacy Semenich, College of Agricultural Sciences Dean at Oregon State University. I believe I'm ex officio.
Director Taylor.
Alexis Taylor, Director at the Oregon Department of Agriculture.
I'd also like to remind people in the room to please use the sign-in sheet on the table. And if you're joining us online only, to please enter your name and organization in the chat box. That will help us stay organized. So I think that's everybody, Brian.
Thank you, Carla. I want to note that public comment is scheduled for today at 2:30 p.m. We received 2 written public comments and have 1 request to make verbal comments at today's meeting. If you'd like to sign up this afternoon to provide verbal comment in person, please use the sign-in sheet on the table prior to making your comments or prior to the comment period. If you're joining the meeting online, please make a request using the chat box, including your name and organization. Comment time will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Also want to remind folks, board members, especially guests at this meeting, please state your name for the record before you begin your comments. Let's see from there. We need to approve the minutes from our last meeting.
Elin Miller, for the record, I move approval of the minutes as presented.
Okay, second.
Barbara Boyer, second.
Okay, motion seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from our previous meeting, say aye.
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 All right, approved. Now we'll move on to Director Taylor's report, Director's report.
Good afternoon, everyone. It has been busy time since we've last gotten together. A couple items I want to highlight. You'll hear about the budget. We're in the kind of home stretch of compiling our budget, which you will get a more in-depth briefing about, but that's taking a lot of our time. Our budget has to be turned in September 1, so it's a big focus for our agency. I hope you recently saw that we have announced USDA has approved Oregon for a state meat inspection program. I believe we were the 28th state to be approved, but it was the first time in 20 years that USDA has approved a state program. It was a huge lift, really started as we started to see some cracks in our meat processing supply chain through COVID, and some of the backup that ranchers were experiencing in Oregon due to some of those supply chain and really big meat processing plants in the Midwest, up in Washington, having to shut down as they had COVID outbreaks in their plants. It was led in no small part by the Oregon legislature during a special session in 2020. And so we have one facility that has applied, and we're going to bring under state meat inspection to start. We certainly expect more. In addition to our state meat inspection program, which is going to be a new program going forward at ODA, we also had a grant program. We were able to, the legislature gave us $2 million. We were able to award 6 facilities to either expand or bring on new meat processing capacity, either under state inspection or under USDA's inspection. And so we're really excited about that. Those dollars are getting to those grantees now. a cross section of the state. So we tried to be really thoughtful about species that could be slaughtered or processed, the parts of the state also. So that's a really exciting progress that we've made. We're actually going to the e-board in September to ask for more money, a little, and the board, if you'll remember after the last meeting, did a letter in support, which we were really appreciative of. So we will share that again with the legislature and some of the staff working on this with our e-board ask. I think that's extremely helpful. And then we are also working on a program option package, a POP for some additional funding, which Lauren and Jonathan will talk about. So there's a lot of progress here, and I think it's really helpful progress both for our farmers and ranchers and our agriculture community and consumers who are looking for Oregon raised product.
Elin Miller for the record. Director, do you need another letter from us, or is that one going to suffice?
I think the one that you did should suffice. Thank you. Yeah. On the topic of market access, we have, as COVID restrictions have started to be lifting here in the United States, but also abroad, we're doing a lot of work on trade missions again. We had obviously shifted a lot of our work to virtual, and those are coming back to in-person, which is great. In July, we hosted our first inbound trade mission from Japan, which was very exciting in 2 or 3 years, something like that. Deputy Director Henderson went to the UK on a USDA agricultural trade mission, and he's also applied to go to East Africa later this fall, which I think there are some really interesting potential market opportunities over there as well. And so we're looking to take some Oregon businesses to explore an area that we really haven't been to yet. So, and then also the governor is working on a fall trade mission as well back to Asia. So, which is obviously some of our largest markets where we traditionally always go. So having not been there for several years now, I think it is really important to get back over there at a senior level for Oregon government to still continue to show they are important markets to us. And then the 2 other things I just kind of wanted to mention. I know we have briefed the board on the Oregon Disaster Assistance Program. We have just concluded, and we're still wrapping up a final pieces, and we will put out some formal information on ODAP. But we concluded a second round, and all told, 275 producers accessed that program, and we allocated just over $19.4 million. So I think very successful, really proud of that effort. And, I think it really shows like how much need was out there and the program really achieving the needs of our agricultural community, whether that be to help bridge to get to some federal assistance, which we know that is happening. Some producers are reaching out through the banks to figure out their loan repayment if it wasn't forgiven, or just provide needed assistance that the federal disaster programs haven't been able to cover. So really proud of that effort. We do get questions about would this coverage or program be available for 2022? It was clearly in statute just for 2021. So it could potentially be a conversation at the Oregon legislature, but it is not something that we necessarily have in our budget at this point. And then on the last item, well, two more items. One is just around hiring. You're going to see, I think, a lot of new faces at ODA. We are, as an employer, are having a lot of hiring activities going on and bringing new people into our agency. One of the things, obviously, you all know at this point, since last we met, it has been announced that I've been nominated by President Biden to a senior role at USDA. And one of the things that I've been focused on with Deputy Henderson, Assistant Director Sandow, is really our team and making sure at the executive level and our management level, we have that consistency in leadership. I am grateful that Lauren and Jonathan are very committed to serve through get the agency not just through the transition, but well beyond the transition. They're committed to staying on board. And I think we have a really solid executive team, but we've really been focused on that succession planning, in particular the past few months that I have been known that I will be departing the agency. Obviously, I get a lot of questions about what my timeline looks like. And we're still waiting for the Senate Agriculture Committee to do a hearing. We are dependent on the Senate for me to kind of really step into that new role, hopefully sometime this fall, but the timing is really unknown at this point. ODA will, when I depart, we'll have an acting director, and then the governor, the new governor, whoever that will be, will have the opportunity to appoint a permanent director the way I was appointed by Governor Brown. I'm very grateful the governor has allowed me to continue to serve in this role while I've been pending Senate confirmation. And with that, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you as the board and past board members. I've really learned a lot during my tenure here at ODA from all of you. I think the board is really representative of Oregon agriculture. I think you do really great work. So thank you for your service on this board. And you're a really invaluable part of the agency, the work that we do. And so I just want to personally thank you for all of your time, whether it's been at board meetings or your time with me outside of board meetings to offer your perspective, your advice, and just show me around your operations, which is always a lot of fun. So I really appreciate it. And I'm sad. It's bittersweet. I'm sad this is my last board meeting with all of you, but I'm glad that I've been able to have one last one. So, and that's it.
Well, we're going to miss you, Alexis, and thank you for your report, by the way. Are there any questions, comments for Alexis?
I don't know if you can, Barbara Boyer, on the Oregon Disaster Assistance Program, how will the recipients know if their loan is forgiven? How, is there a notice that's going to go out, or what does that process look like?
Chair Harper, Director Taylor, Chair Member Barbara Boyer, Assistant Director Jonathan Sandow. So when they went through the application process, that formula was kind of determined up front based on their self kind of assertion that they would get federal funds or that they were applying for federal funds. And so let's say I went and applied and I said, no, I'm not going to go seek federal funds. I would have gotten a forgiveness letter or notification right then and there. After that, if I was going to get it, once I got it, it would be refactored into the formula. And then based on what it was, it'd be determined later on.
Okay.
So they have, I think, until the end of the year to basically run those formulas.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board members in person or virtually have any questions or comments for Director Taylor? Okay, hearing none. So we will move on to our agenda item 2, and will be the ODA's budget and legislative update, which will be Deputy Director Henderson and Assistant Director Sandow.
Good afternoon, Lauren Henderson, Deputy Director with the Oregon Department of Agriculture. Just to sidetrack, I'm going to miss Alexis a whole bunch. I'm kind of getting tired of saying goodbye to directors, but maybe that's a sign I've stayed around too long. But excited for the opportunity for her, especially since I got to go to London on a USDA trip with the Deputy Secretary. And I made a mistake of saying in a big room that I could not wait for Alexis to leave. That's not what I meant, but anyway. No, we've had a lot of fun with that, and we'll continue to do that. As far as our budget and legislative concepts go, you have a summary, and I'm sure that you've not had a chance to look at it in depth. That's okay. It's really there because our next board meeting, we will spend, I think, a pretty good amount of time on our budget. We will have had the agency request budget in as of September 1, and we'll have had, I'm sure, further direction from the Department of Administrative Services on what the governor's, and that's plural, budgets might look like. Remember, we're preparing this for Governor Brown. as well as a new governor who will put their stamp on it. Our philosophy around this budget has been really to make it work for both of those things, both of those governors, because it's really focused a lot on our core capacity in our agency and trying to keep initiatives like the meat inspection program going. I think it reflects, like a lot of state agencies, the challenges we have in our internal capacity of our agency to take on all of the work that we're doing. And Director Taylor said it nicely. It's been busy and will continue to be busy. That has its challenges, particularly when you look at your staff and they're exhausted coming out of COVID. So we're stretched pretty thin. That's not unusual in state government. You will, I think, hear that. I did want to just make a comment about this because there is a lot of infrastructure in our administrative area, and I know there will be concerns with our stakeholders, ag groups, about what does that mean for their fees? What does that mean for the agency's indirect rate? So forth, so forth. I want to put on record that we think about in the director's office all the time. Our intent is not to raise a bunch of fees and have indirect overhead rates that are not justifiable. But at the same time, our agency can't keep doing what it's doing and do it well. And so there's a balance there. And we will not be tone deaf to that. And we'll keep that in consideration as we go on. That being said, there's a lot in our budget. And you know how this process works. We're not going to get everything. This was really, I think, our leadership attempt to put everything that we knew that we needed on a list. I'm sure it will be gone through. It could even all be denied at the DAS level. They do not do that because they don't like the programs. They do that to make sure that the new governor particularly has choices and can do that. And then it's up to us to talk through, along with your advice, I think, on what really the most important pieces of our budget are and will be. So that was the philosophy in the budget itself. We can answer any of the questions, and I will let Jonathan talk about the summary itself. We have talked about the few legislative concepts that we've had before, I think at the last board meeting, and Jonathan and I can talk through those. But we will have at the September e-board a couple of e-board items. One is the state meat inspection grants. We tried to do that at the last e-board and the timing wasn't right. We're going to take another run at it in September. It's a little bit north of $2 million. We've had good feedback around that request. And if we get that, that will enable us to fully fund the first set of projects we had, because we had to cut them back because of the limited funding. And then go a little bit deeper in our grant list for the other projects to fund a few more. I think if we were to get both rounds of those dollars, we'll be at about 10 businesses that are going to be able to benefit from those funds and increase the capacity there. I personally am super excited about this. There's a lot of work to do, but this is one of those things that once you get the momentum, you don't want to let it go, because I really think it's going to move the dial. It's not going to hugely move it, but you got to start somewhere, and I think it will make a difference, particularly in some of those processing deserts. That's what I call them, that we have in our state, where they're just not readily available. So that's one of our e-board requests. The second one is emerald ash borer, which I think I have Chris Spinneman on the line here from our plant program director to help. But that's a new detection. I think it's not a surprise. We were worried about that. And it's an invasive that affects our ash trees. And so we will have a request to really just figure out how big the problem is and do some surveys. It's not a request to do a big eradication project like Japanese beetle, because I don't think we really understand today how bad the problem is. And so that's what that request is. That is in partnership with the Oregon Department of Forestry, and you will hear a lot about that, I think, in coming months and what that means. But it's so a scary invasive that we don't want here at all. And that will affect our nursery industry and stuff going forward. So you'll hear more about those both of those e-board requests as we go forward. So I will stop there. Jonathan can talk about the summary and what it is and maybe highlight a few things, and then we can go for there for questions if there's needed.
I just wanted to highlight quickly, as you look through this document is anything that's not our base budget, additions to our base budget. So you may see the CAFO program is not mentioned, but that's in our base budget. So this is anything new or any additions to programs.
Board members, through the chair, Assistant Director Jonathan Sandow. So this is a 7-page document. I'm going to read it word for word, so I hope you guys are ready. I'm just going to highlight a few things. We talked about quite a few of these last board meeting, and then as Lauren mentioned, we'll go a bit more in depth in the next one as well once we have a full package. But to kind of understand what this is, the summary chart on the top, so the 21-23 legislative approved budget is what is our current standing approved numbers budget. That's what our base budget is, plus all the one-time funding levels that we had gotten over the last 2 years. The 2023-25 current service level is that base budget. So anything that automatically rolls over or would roll over is what considered our base budget. And then that final column is the current service level plus all the POPs, the requests that are in this summary document. So that's kind of how you can read that chart there. So I'm just going to highlight a few, mostly just kind of talking about what Lauren had talked about is, package 130, that's really that core capacity to build that kind of base infrastructure into the agency and bring a lot of what we need forward. On page 2, package 220 and then 250, those are those complementary packages for the meat inspection program. One is for the actual inspectors out in the field doing the meat inspection program, and then 250 is the infrastructure grants, the $10 million request there to continue those programs going. On page 3, package 360 is the Climate Smart agricultural grant that we submitted to USDA. We have not heard anything back. They closed round 2, I think it was in June. And so I'm sure that they are still compiling, they're still assessing. I think the last that I saw was there was over $18 billion worth of requests for the $1 billion that they had allocated to it. And so this one is this is the accounts for the grant that we put forward in totality. But it won't, getting that full reward is yet to be determined. And likely won't happen until the fall is when we'll probably hear more back. And then I think those were the ones I really wanted just to pull out and highlight in terms of the ones that we had talked about last time. I think that there were questions around, but then also just kind of emphasizing the tone and tenor of the overall package. The final page is two summaries of the 2 legislative concepts that we've put forward on page 7 there. So those are the ones that ODA will be submitting. And then part of what the full budget is, you'll see we have to put a 10%, every state agency does, required by law, has to put a 10% reduction list forward, broken down into 5% and then 5% to equal that 10%. So that goes across all funding categories: general fund, lottery funds, other funds, federal funds. And so that'll be included in part of the budget. This year, kind of the methodology that we used in the past is really looking across our agency program prioritization list, which we can provide you all once we have the full package put together. It might help walk through it. But then also, there's always kind of different philosophies on how to approach it. Some years you'll see larger chunks to full programs, and other years you'll see a little bit of a share the pain across all the programs. We did a little bit of a hybrid model this year, so the first 5% is a little bit whole program, and then the next 5% is kind of a little bit of a share the pain model to get to those 10% reduction lists. But again, that's an exercise that's never fun to do, never easy to do, but one that is required by statute and will be part of every agency's budget, including ours, on September 1st.
as you look through our budget requests that we're working on for the agency, I've kind of thought about them in 4 main themes, and that might be helpful as we've organized. The first is around investment in our core services. What are the core programs that we run as an agency, and making sure we have enough resources in those programs? Think the Ag Water Quality Program, our pesticide enforcement program, and you'll see budget asks around upping some of, well, and ag water quality, expanding the number of staff and resources there, those types of core services to us as an agency. The next is around internal agency operations. Our budget has grown. The amount of programs and services that are expected we're being asked to deliver has grown. We need to make sure we have the IT, the HR resources, those internal services to continue to support our programs and services, which in turn are critical to supporting Oregon agriculture. The third is really around community engagement and equity. How are we communicating to our core partners, interested Oregonians, and ensuring that we're investing in DEI as an agency? And then fourth is really around supporting market development opportunities for Oregon agriculture, the meat facility grants, and some of those types of things. And so I've thought about it broadly. Our budget going into the next biennium and budget request cycle is in those 4 kind of themed areas, if it's helpful.
Chair Harper, one of the things I wanted to add at the end here is package 110, the North Valley Complex. We've talked about that before. And you can see the number there. It's north of $5 million. Since I believe the board is going to be around the Wilsonville area next board meeting, I have arranged and asked for a tour of that facility if the board wishes. It will be in construction, but I think they will be past the demolition stage, and I think it would give the board a really good idea of what we're talking about there. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see if we can make that happen. The Department of Administrative Services has said whatever you need. We may have the budget folks from the legislature also with us on that tour because they're pretty excited about seeing it too, as well as the DAS folks. So anyway, look forward to that if that works out and the board would wish to put that on the agenda.
Barbara Boyer. So I'm really excited about that climate smart agriculture. I talked with Mike a lot as he wrote this application, and I read the whole submission, and it's rather exciting. So I really hope we get it. So, but it really, it's a game changer, especially with climate as lead topic.
And I just wanted to call out, I guess, Elin Miller wanted to call out the 2 letters that we received from the public were in support of 320. Is that correct for the 7 FTEs? It was the Oregon Environmental Council and Trout Unlimited, I think, were in support of that. So.
All right, Chair Harper here. Are there any other questions or comments on the ODA budget and legislative update?
Elin Miller, just a question, being still new to the board and going through the process. And I think, Lauren, you had mentioned that sometimes with this initial cut or approval, instead wanting a new governor to be able to weigh in. And so that's that process in a new election cycle. So it may be that we would know really, I mean, what's the timing that we would know that? Because the inauguration's in January, and so is it like March or what that timing is? And then second, for any future potential budget requests that anyone in industry would be interested in ODA being involved in, how soon should we be starting to sit down, anyone start sitting down to have that discussion with you? Because I think it's way too late now for 23 to 25, but what's the best timing for the next cycle? Thank you.
Chair Harper and Elin, I don't think it's ever too late to have the discussions. I mean, I think we can start talking about some of those things now. The timing is this. Governor Brown has to put a budget together by December. And then at the change, once we know who the new governor, they have until February. So we'll be in this little spot. We will try to keep the board apprised as we know it and what's happening with that on this particular budget for the 23-25. As far as other items and even this budget, I would encourage the board, if you have specific questions about this one, get them to Carla. If they are questions that are just about a number or something, Jonathan and I or our budget folks can help you answer that one-on-one. If they're ones that are really bigger than that deserve, us to get to the whole board, we can talk about that and collect them for our discussion at the next board meeting so everybody can hear those. So don't be bashful about asking those kinds of questions because it's a lot to take in. But I don't think it's ever too late to at least inquire about what about this or what about that. We can keep a list of those things. It doesn't mean we'll be able to carry them forward, but it's always good to get what people are thinking. I have a list already of 2 or 3 things. That North Valley, that's been 4 bienniums in the making, just so you know. And that's how that works sometimes. So
I would say though, if you're thinking 25, 27 biennium, right? Usually the fall of 23, we as an agency will start thinking about the 25, 27 biennium. And then really through in the spring. So kind of fall to spring is a great time on the early side to start engaging. So fall of 23 to spring of 24. So we basically get a budget passed and we start already thinking about the next while we're getting that implemented.
Thank you both.
All right, Chair Harper here. Do our virtual board members, Josh, Shantae, Chad, have any questions or comments on the report? Okay.
This is Shantae Johnson. I don't really have too many extra comments, just to say that I'm really excited about the funding around climate change and seeing where that's going to lead us, and also around the DEI funding that is being allocated. So that's all that I have. And also that I didn't get to say this earlier as I was coming on, but I'm going to definitely miss you, Director Taylor, as we move forward. But I'm super, super excited for you. I think we've all kind of said our goodbyes, but I just wanted to mention that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Shantae. I think with that, we'll move on to our agenda item 3, and that will be workforce availability and skills development programs panel discussion. So we have Carla, they are in person here. Okay. Yeah, excellent. Okay, sorry. All right, so we have Sandy Porter, Treasure Valley Community College, and Dirk DeBoer, Malheur County Poverty and to Prosperity, Chad Cruikshank, District FA Advisor, Shauna Peterson, Eastern Oregon Border Region Economic Development Board, Executive Director. Oh, and y'all are invited up to the table up here.
Sandy Porter, Treasure Valley Community College. I did not expect you to want to keep those. If you want to keep them, you're welcome to. I brought plenty, but something to look at besides a PowerPoint.
apologize. We are a little ahead of schedule. All right, we'll begin with Sandy.
Sandy Porter, Treasure Valley Community College. I'm an instructor in the ag department at TVCC. What I brought to you today is to talk a little bit about some of our programs that we work with the state. We call them milestone and momentum points. Oftentimes our students are a little bit hesitant, right, to start college. Maybe they're currently employed and want to pick up a few courses, right, to get some kind of wage increase in what they're currently doing. So we have some little packages of courses that they can get those, get a certificate, and oftentimes that will lead a student to continue on and pursue a 2-year degree. But a lot of times a certificate seems a lot more attainable for those folks as they get started. So that just kind of explains some of the ones that are currently there. We also work pretty closely with our high schools to do something we call dual credit. So it's pretty common for a high school student to leave with at least a few, like I think the goal is usually 9 college credits as they graduate, but depending upon the program that they're in, those numbers could be much higher. So I have to be honest, I wasn't exactly sure what kind of information that you folks were looking for today, so I'm happy to answer questions or follow your lead on those things. We also just have a new building on our campus, a career and technical education program, a new building. So if you folks would like a tour, I'd be happy to arrange that over the next couple of days. Something that you'd be interested in.
This is impressive.
Thank you. Yeah. We do have some new programs coming online that will have those career kind of focuses. We have an ag mechanics program that's getting kind of going. Also some health services programs. So we know our rural communities need lots of things, but we also really try to make sure that the careers that we help our students get to are also living wage ones, right? So they can come into our communities and be members and feel like they can stay, right, and build families and be part of our community. So we're always working on those kind of programs.
Luisa Santa Maria, all of these are just certification programs, right? The ones that you're sharing.
Yes, so all of those are embedded in our part of a 2-year program. So students will take that grouping of classes and it would naturally fit into a 2-year degree.
That's what I was going to ask. These credits are going towards the 2-year.
Absolutely. So depending upon the program that they choose, they're going to take anywhere from 12 to like 24 of those credits, and that would roll into their 90 credit degree. So we want them to
continue. Yeah. They can get it, but at least they have some.
Really, it's like a sales pitch then just to stay another year, right, and finish up that last part of their degree.
All right, so many. What is the most popular of these?
You know,
you have more students.
What's that?
Which certification program do you have more?
There are some programs that I think students are naturally drawn to, like our wildland fire, those kind of, we call them our sexy programs. But then oftentimes it's just a gateway, right, for a student to get into college and figure out what they really want to do. So wildland fire is very popular, criminal justice. And we really expect like we have an ranch animal technician program, and that one's pretty popular also, so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Miguel Lopez. So Sandy, what inspired you guys to go out and start doing this ahead of as a way to bring people in and get them further in an education cycle? Like what inspired that?
Yeah, I wish I could say that it was us as a college, right? But it was often driven by the state. And we know that education often feels momentous to our students. So if we can put it into small, like you eat an elephant one bite at a time, and that's how you get an education too. So we put it into smaller packages. Those packages are kind of stackable. And then most of our programs, we have some transfer programs. So a lot of those would embed into a transfer program. So if they wanted to go on to get a bachelor's, they could do that from this entry point.
And do you see a lot of these programs? Do you see often students take this and then go into what you just described?
Yeah, it's not uncommon. I would say it's probably 50-50. Some of our students are very location bound, so they don't perceive them to have the ability, right, to go to Corvallis or wherever to finish a degree. But a lot of them can get the jobs they want with an associate's degree. A lot of our students come in and they don't perceive themselves as college students. So they come in, they kind of find their path and find what they like, and they're pretty happy to continue on to get a bachelor's degree.
Ela Miller, I actually used to serve on the Board of Education for Umpqua Community College, and I'll say this is really impressive. Are you attracting students from outside the area for this? Because this is pretty amazing lineup you've got.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Our student base is pretty interesting. We serve quite a few students from Idaho and from Eastern Oregon. Yeah, we are unique as a community college. It's interesting what gets college students is to a campus, right? We have dorms, which is helpful, so student housing is important. We also have athletic teams, which is really important. We have a rodeo team that brings in a lot of students, right? Especially in Eastern Oregon. And then there is this really interesting part of getting students into our doors that's part of marketing. Like they have to be able to identify with whatever that major is. Like, yeah, equine, like horse stuff and cow stuff, always super popular, right? We've talked about, we have a crop science degree currently, and we're talking about changing that and calling it plant sciences, because most of the time in high school, students take plant sciences. So what we would say is crop science is very similar curriculum, but students don't always find themselves in that. So trying to get the right labeling, right? So they identify and find our curriculum is kind of a missing puzzle piece sometimes.
This is Josh Zielinski from the computer screen. I'm also on the board of advisors for the horticulture school at Chemeketa, which is here in Salem. I was wondering if you have any, the program was really getting up and rolling, and the current job market has really dwindled overall attendance in community colleges, I think, across the country. I was just curious if you guys were experiencing the same thing in your area, or if enough employers are saying, no, if you want to do this, or if you want to advance, go to the community college and do these courses.
Well, Josh, first, I just want to say, I just saw your new greenhouses this spring, and they're beautiful. So pretty, such a beautiful facility that you folks have. Yeah, we are always in competition, right? It's very difficult to convince a 18 to 20-year-old person that the investment in education right now will pay off long-term when you can get a job at McDonald's for $18 an hour. Like, I'm a pretty good saleswoman, but I'm not that great. So that's a significant conversation that we're having with our students. It's about long-term investment and where it gets them in the long term. We have seen our enrollment across our campus, ours in our career and technical education programs has stayed pretty consistent. We also had the ability over the past 2 years, probably some advantages for some other schools in the state, in that we only had one quarter where we had to be virtual. And we were small enough that we wrote a pretty serious plan. Like I bust a lot of tables and sprayed a lot of disinfectant to get our students right back in our classrooms. But we knew that Eastern Oregon and our rural infrastructure was not ready for all of our kids to be home at once. And so we really worked hard to be able to do that. And I think that directly correlated to our ability to maintain our enrollment is that our students were able to be in classrooms, and we were distanced and masked, but we were together. And I think that made a huge impact on our ability to maintain our student population.
Thanks.
That's amazing. This is Shantae Johnson joining from the computer screen as well. Sorry to jump in there, and I apologize for the background noise, but I just want to say I'm super excited about anything that gets our students interested in ag, and helping to create that pipeline into agriculture is so essential as we're talking about like a lot of farmers aging out. And so it's really important that we get our youth excited. I did have a question around what farmers are you working with in your local area around supporting, future jobs for some of the youth that are coming out of your program?
Yeah, that's, I always joke, once I get into a meeting with folks, I never forget your name. So we really try to get our students out as much as possible. In career and technical education, we really believe we obviously need students in our classrooms, but we really need them out getting experience, right? And my goal for our students is to find who they want to be in the industry. I want them to go out and meet people. So when they want to build a career, they'll be like, I want to be just like so-and-so. And I want them to find their person. So locally, we work with some of the local farms Our crops program is probably our slowest one to grow. We finally have a faculty now who is really an expert in crops. Like I'm an animal science person, so if I teach a crops program, we are not in a good day. So we have pretty strong operations with some of our local feedlots and kind of forage producers, but we are always looking to expand our the list of folks that we work with. And we know that it's a big ask sometimes to have a college on your education is not at the speed of business. And that is a tricky part when we go out to a field visit or go be part of those things. Like it is inherently slower and there's a lot more questions than a normal processing day would be.
Barbara Boyer, what's enrollment going to be this fall?
I wish I had the crystal ball.
What about last year?
I think our numbers, Dirk might know better than I do. Gosh, are we 2,500, 3,000? They always tell us based on percentages. I think we were down about 6% across our average, but that kind of varies by program too. So some of parts of the state, I think we were pretty proud of our 6%, which we never want to be down, but we were dealing with some of our sister schools that were down, 25 or 30%. So yeah, it was pretty horrific across
all the community colleges.
Yeah, education as a whole, I think has been down. So sorry, I can get you a better number.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you for that presentation. Next, we have Dirk DeBoer.
Okay. Well, I can speak a little bit about P2P. We started the program over 10 years ago, that's Poverty to Prosperity. And we came about it is that if you want to increase the standard of living, best way to do it is by having a better trained and retrained and re-educated workforce. And so we found that helping the high schools and the college connect with each other and the industry. And that's a difficult, it's a really problem all over the United States is how do you find the right jobs? And so we started with the high schools and we had healthcare, welding, we have culinary, Ontario and all those, and that feeds into the college. That's so the whole thing is that we looked at, and we're just a small group, just 4 of us, and how can you motivate a person, a student, he or she in middle school when he or she start to struggle a little bit. And that is the best way is to show them something where it is light on the end of the tunnel. Show them the culinary, show them healthcare from the nursing home to the hospital. And I tell you, one of our members, Ken Hart, he took some of the students that took nursing and he did them around the hospital. And on the end of it, he said, I hope I can hire all of you later on. That is the motivation that we're really looking for. And that's basically what I've been involved in the P2P program. That's what we're talking about today. How do we motivate, but how do we connect with the industry? And this is what I found, that we are not very good connected on the vocational schooling and the industry. And I found that out, and I'll tell you, this only takes a few. I was in Europe on a trade show, and about packing, shipping, agriculture products. And one guy said to me, I was with a friend, he said, where do you farm? I said, the United States. Well, where? Well, you're not going to say Nassau, Ontario. So I said, Boise, Idaho. And he came back and he said, oh, Murakami produce, this. And he knew a lot of farmers here. And I said, why are you building all that equipment in the Netherlands while labor laws are more strict in Europe, wages are higher? Why? And he didn't want to tell me, but finally he said, you do not have the trained people for me to hire. And this is what we found, where there's a disconnect between the schools and the workplace. And so that's where we hope with the P2P, to start in the high schools, give people hope, show them that it is our ways to make a decent living. So that's basically my little speech. So that's where we started with about, and it's 12 years ago or something. And the college has done a great job. High schools, we have the 3 high schools. We have meetings together. And we hope to get more connected with the industry. But on the other side, the industry, it's difficult to break into that cycle with the industry, So that's my little speech.
Miguel Lopez. So Dirk, when you say poverty to prosperity, what is it? Is it a nonprofit? Is it a county ran?
Yeah, it's just a nonprofit, just a group of us old timers.
It wasn't when you first started, right? It wasn't even, it's not a registered nonprofit at all.
No.
It was like a board meeting. It's like a group of folks that came together.
Yeah.
To build a pipeline.
And so, but we got to connect together, and it's difficult. It's difficult. We still today we have difficult times to connect the institutions together between the high school, the college, and the job market. Those have to be connected. And we have a difficult time, and I think you have, to find from the industry that they really commit themselves to saying, this is what I need. This is what, when you sell cars, you find out what the market wants. We have kids. We got the design. We have to see what the market can carry. That's where we're on. So anyhow, that's.
Yeah, Sandy, sorry, Dirk, Dirk's on our Board of Education. I'm going to get in trouble at our next meeting now. When we started with the P2P project, what we did is in like welding, healthcare, and there was one more, we would take high school students, right, from all the area, and they would come together, and then they would be in some college classes. So kind of made them their unique cohorts, and then they got some college and kind of got skilled up in the idea that they would get like a really technical education in high school and then be able to transfer in as a cohort to finish up their college programs and go right into the industry, I think is kind of what the idea was. But it really started with a group of 3 or 4 local farmers that worked with our high schools and the college to put those, they railroaded a lot of things to make it happen, to get all those groups in the same room, and did a great job doing that.
Okay. Good.
Okay, I'm up. Chad Cruikshank. I am a high school FFA advisor. I am also the Snake River District Advisor for our group, and there are 11 districts across the state of Oregon. So with that, we have roughly 10 high schools here in our local area. And what I'm going to present on and speak on behalf of is going to kind of piggyback off of these two, even though I didn't know it was going to, but it's going to. So this is kind of fun. Maybe I'll end up in the hot seat here. So industry recognized credentials. So we're looking at things for high school students going out into the workforce and maybe not necessarily going the college route. However, some of these students that are ending up with these industry recognized credentials are coming back and getting more credentials through the college. So what I'm going to speak on behalf of is basically pathways funding through Oregon Department of Education. Students can get licensed in pesticides, forklift operator, tractor machinery, OSHA 10, artificial insemination. The beef quality, pork quality has been updated. We have a 3-year record keeping badge for our state degree students. We also have the welding certifications, and many students are participating in the welding piece. That seems like it's really grabbing some traction. A lot of the building and stuff that's going on here in our local area. And there is quite a bit of demand for those students. Some small gasoline certificates for small engine repairs. If you have a problem with your lawnmower and you need. So with that, I and my colleagues, I guess, are trying to produce students with certifications for high wage, high demand jobs in our area. So I'd go ahead and open it up to questions. And this is, like I said, kind of piggybacking off of the workforce and what they're talking about the college level, because we are partners with TVCC and those credits through our high school institutions.
Okay. Elin Miller for the record. Chad, you also serve on the state board of FFA Association.
Yeah.
So yeah, among others. Could you also just integrate FFA into this as far as, again, preparation for workforce availability and skills development, because it's also a leadership standpoint? Would you spend a couple minutes on that?
Yeah, so basically where we're trying to think of the word that we're looking for right now, where we're headed with work-based learning. So what I think with the FFA and the things that we're doing within, I'm gonna choose a supervised agricultural experience. So any of you that are aware of SAE or involved in an ag program, this is all kind of part of the 3-circle model as ag teachers. You have SAE, you have the classroom, and you have the FFA. So with this 3-circle model, the SAE part of things is outside of the classroom. So these students that may be certified or working towards certifications could potentially be filling the ag plane that is producing or putting whatever it may be on the crops. Students right now are welding in industry. So what they do with that and the FFA and the SAEs is they record that data and then they will apply for their state degree. And I think this is going to be a big thing when we talk about work-based learning, because in the 3-circle model and what we're doing, we're already doing it. Now we're figuring out how we're going to incorporate this and how it's going to align to the standards and what ODE is looking for on the work-based learning piece. Thank you.
We good on time? Eric Oram. This is for whoever just wants to answer it. So just from my experience, my son's gone through a community college program last 2 years in Pendleton, and my son and my daughters, they've done like Oregon Promise or what's the other one, where they were taking college classes in high school, and it's worked really well. My oldest probably cut a year off of her degree going to Oregon State, and my son had quite a few credits going into Blue Mountain. But one thing I will say that we've seen is, so he finished his second year, got a 2-year certificate, but it wasn't a transfer certificate. And so when he went on and visited Eastern and Idaho and sat down with them, so many of his classes were really not transferable. They were just electives, and what it ended up doing was he lost his ambition to go forward anymore, because he said, well, I wasted a whole year. And so what he's going to do, I think, is go one more year and take some of his classes in person that he wasn't able to do during COVID, which is good. But I think now with the ag entrepreneurship program at Eastern, I know kids in the program. It's very popular, and a good program. But I would hope that, and I've talked to Blue Mountain and Eastern about this, but is try to work on making that transition easier for those kids, making sure they're taking the classes, because really the only way to do it is just to do a 2-year transfer degree. But they want to take ag classes. They want more of the hands-on ag classes. And unfortunately, through the COVID, I was glad to hear that Treasure Valley kept their doors open more. But if you weren't an ag or diesel tech in Pendleton, or I think nursing, you were online, and they lost a lot of kids through that. So, but that's the only thing I could say. I don't know if there's any ideas or if that's above your guys' level of decision making, but it's not easy to get that. Kids feel like they've lost a year, right? Or wasted a year. So anyways, thank you.
I think that's a very common thing that we see with our students, and that it's often an advising issue for us, is that a student comes in and says, man, I just wanted to, my dad said I had to get off the farm for 2 years and I'm going to go right back. And then at the end of the first year, at the beginning of the second year, they realize that they might want to go on. And there are some programs, I think the ag entrepreneurship at EOU is really going to be great, because I think it's going to allow students to fit their needs into a 4-year degree. We just talked to Walla Walla, and they're doing a bachelor's of applied sciences, and I think we will be looking into those also. I think there's a lot of opportunities where our education system has been really rigid in what, like, you have to, and I'm an educator, I need to be careful. You have to check some boxes, right, in education. And I think we are at a point where we know that people can be successful if the boxes aren't exactly the same as what Oregon State has said over the years. And so I think those conversations are starting. We are doing a lot, we use the term pathways for so many things in education right now, but I am on a group at our college that is looking at really, what do they call it? Broad entry points and exit points for students. So if a student wants to be an ag major, like, it's not a blood oath, right? You should be able to go to college and kind of get your feet underneath you, right? If you realize that you like row crops and you thought you liked diesel mechanics, I don't think that you should be behind a year, right? You should be able to be in this grouping of classes that you can navigate and then kind of pick your path from there. So the state has put a lot of money into making some of those broader entry points for students, and they are requiring all the community colleges and the colleges to try to be really efficient with our students, with their time and their money, which I think we owe that to our students. Education is expensive, and if they take one wrong class, I don't think it's fair that it costs them a year of tuition and time. So there are certainly things in the works to make that more efficient. I'll give you my card, because there's we can visit about some other things that maybe not TVCC or BMCC, but there are programs that could be helpful. So.
Well, if they don't have the 2 years and the certificate, then they lose a lot of momentum. You have to have the certificate. If you don't have the certificate, I think it's very difficult to go to different schools, and that's what we have seen. So, yeah.
And we'll often have students try to transfer out. I mean, sometimes it's like a writing class or a math class that they need to finish up. And if they can send it back to us from their first term from their school, they can complete their degree and then start, like, I joke about putting a bow on the package. If you don't have the bow on the package when you transfer, the receiving institution has the ability to pick it apart. But if it has the bow on it and your degree has been conferred, they don't pick it apart nearly as severely. So, and it's just hard to explain that to students when they just want to get out or do something different. But sometimes those 1, 2, or 3 credit classes can make a big difference.
Any other questions or comments so far in this for our panel? Josh, Shantae, Chad? Oh, I guess, hope Chad's on. Is Chad on? Oh, I just keep saying his name. He's not even on. Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Dean Simonich as well. Don't want to leave you out.
Yeah, nothing to add, a good conversation, and I'm just glad that we have a lot of different options across the state for our students to meet their passion and their career goals. So important that all of these routes for obtaining degrees in agricultural and natural resources are connected to each other and collaborate and help our students succeed.
This is Shantae Johnson. I did actually have one question. With some of the farm partnerships that you all have, how do you support the farmers that you're working with? Like, let's say a wheat farm wanted to be like a host site. I don't know if you actually do this, so just bear with me, but I'm just thinking about like actual practicum hours along with the academic hours that go along with learning how to farm. And I realize that there's so many different paths that you can go, but I'm just curious if, what kind of support do you give to your local farmers that want to engage with your workforce program and support students with education?
we're all looking at each other, waiting for someone to speak. Chad, do you want to go?
Chad Cruikshank. I'll go ahead and attempt to tackle this. A lot of times the carrot that I'll dangle to the farmers is if I have a class of forklift students coming out at the high school level, I always tell them that they can have the pick of the class. So whoever may be the top forklift driver and have the certification, they will be there. And it's interesting enough on just share a short story here on some of the students that kind of balk at you as an educator, like, I'm never going to use this forklift certification. Why? And I'm just speaking from behalf of high school students. And then they write in their graduation, thank you. You'll never guess what I'm doing right now. I'm driving a forklift at the local farm, and I have pulled out, I can't tell you how many boxes. So there are some definite, I would say, perks and just those great stories on how these students end up and how they prosper from something that they may not be bought in, but once they have it, it gives them kind of a catch net or something to fall back on when they get out into that level. They're like, oh, well, I have this pesticide certificate or I have this forklift certification. Maybe I'll go attempt something like that. And pretty soon that's their foot in the door and their success story.
I like the little, I think we have to start concentrating more on re-educating the existing farm population. And the reason is, we have GPS, we have so many things, and especially if you do a little bit of packing of your own commodity, like I did when I was active, it changes so fast that we have to really start concentrating on re-educating the existing workforce and update them how to run the computers, how to run a GPS, how you do the field, how you divide the field, all that. And I think that part of that will be maybe evening classes, that we have to go into. But how we as the college get that towards the workforce is a challenge, and I've seen quite a few that says, oh no, I'm not going to teach my employee that and that, then somebody else hire them away. Well, come on, let's just think a little broad, it's just, but we have to come to a really modern way of re-educating the existing workforce. We talk about chemicals, we talk about, like I said, GPS, we talk about the computer software. How do we educate? The farmers are getting bigger and bigger, and they rely more and more on an educated workforce. And I think that's a challenge that we have for the near future.
From the college's perspective, I know when I go to plan my field labs, it's much easier for me to ask someone for a 4-hour block of time. Can you host my students and I for 4 hours and show us your irrigation system? Like, those are pretty easy asks, and we have a great community that will help with those because that's easier, like on an operation. Getting a student employed at a place is a much bigger ask, and it's a little bit risky for both parties. I feel a huge amount of pressure in placement. I have to make sure that I feel really confident that that student is going to go up and be on time and do all these things. And if I don't have a good student that I feel like is going to go and do that, I don't feel super confident trying to ask my industry folks that I rely on for so many things to take those students, right? If it's going to be a gamble for either party. We hosted a legislative party, in the spring. And when Finley and Owens were here, we talked about maybe some funding options. So if I'm going to ask you to host someone and help my students learn, there's a cost to that, right? Like, you're going to have to pay them as employees and workman's comp. And so we talked about maybe some compensation options, like where we use some grant money, right, to pay for those students' labor so they get paid so they can come back to college the next year. But maybe it's an offset, right, or in terms of tax dollars or something for that farm business to make them feel like there's some incentive. And we live in a great community, and there's a lot of folks in agriculture across the state that are really, I would say, have a heart for education. You can see when we take someone out and like they get this little twinkle in their eye, and they're like, oh, I kind of like these kids. Like, those are the ones I go back to. But we need more opportunities in all of our industries that need labor anyways, but getting our college students placed in there is trickier sometimes than it should be.
It is. I agree with that.
All right, Shauna, let you have the floor now.
Well, you couldn't have planned it better because hopefully I can synthesize and bring together with the time that you have remaining on this session. I am the executive director of the Eastern Oregon Border Economic Development Board. We call it the Border Board for short, and you're welcome to use that moniker because it's shorter. The Border Board was created in 2017, and we'll talk about it in more depth at a later session. But basically, it was a creature of the legislature designed to promote economic development in this little stretch of Oregon that you're in, because we're not unique in being agricultural based or rural or all of the other categories slightly economically depressed. But our region is very unique because of our proximity to Idaho, which is dramatically different from the state of Oregon in nearly every way. So our pretty narrow charge is figuring out how to make this edge of Oregon competitive with relatively booming Idaho. So we have focused in the 5 years since the board was seated on listening to educators, industry, governmental entities about really drilling down into what those kind of exacerbated or unique problems are, and then coming up with really innovative ways to address them. The thing that really helps gel that is we do have funding. Our initial appropriation was $5 million, and then we've done what I'm proud to say is a really wonderful job with this kind of experiment. So in the last session, we were appropriated a new $6 million. Out of that first $5 million, we stood up 10 programs. 2 of them are probably of most interest to you, although all of them address those same problems through a myriad of ways, like housing and some other things that are interrelated. But those 2 programs are Workforce and Education Training Grant. TVCC has been awarded grants. We partner with Poverty to Prosperity. Chad's particular program at Nissa High School was awarded a grant, and those are just what they sound like. We ask that the applicants really make a strong case that this particular training is going to meet local workforce needs. We require industry letters of support. We try to be kind of a connecting of the dots in that sense, and have awarded and seen some really good results. A lot of it to support agriculture because that's really a primary driver of the economy in the border region. Another program that we've supported that speaks to this last question is a Malheur Works internship program that's going into its 2nd year and can afford some of what Sandy spoke to in terms of practical experience, but that doesn't financially or in terms of time compromise all already busy industry partners who are really willing to, bring on and mentor people, but it generally comes at pretty good expense financially and time. So we underwrite a little bit of that. Another grant program that we have that's really kind of unique, like I said, the Border Board's excited about being innovative, is a Ready Workforce grant. And this dovetails with what Dirk spoke to, and that is through listening to the various stakeholders in the region, we've identified that there's a pretty good workforce in place, but that isn't maybe trained up to some of the modern needs, or might have other artificial barriers that are preventing them from serving. The most common that have emerged that we've tried to financially help remove are childcare and transportation. And so that wasn't a matter of skilled workforce being unavailable. It was a matter of skilled workforce being unable to actually enter the workforce. So I think those are things that hopefully are of interest to the Board of Agriculture. Open invitation is extended on behalf of my board to the Board of Agriculture because we'd love to hear what you hear from your constituents about the barriers. The last thing that I'll speak to, and then I'm happy to answer questions if you have any of me, is this idea that has come up routinely over the 5 years we've been alive, and that is this navigator or connector role, because it is hard for someone who completes a certificate or degree program or just some credits, or who gets a certification to do something. Sometimes it's hard for them, and again, this is kind of an artificial barrier, to get the actual licensure, or to come over from Idaho, where the population is growing quite a lot faster than it is on our side of the border. It's a bit of a hard stop at the border because it's a little harder to get licensed to do almost anything in Oregon. And presumably that ensures quality and all the things we want it to ensure. But it shouldn't be a barrier if it's just because it's so darn hard, or because you have to go sit in Salem for an in-person test or things like that. So our board is really keenly aware, and we're a little bit of a squeaky wheel in that we're not afraid to, we've developed a strong reputation, and we're not afraid. I have to go to Salem pretty regularly. We're not afraid to say, this is a ridiculous barrier. We've got to remove it or we don't stand a chance. So if you encounter those things, our board's always happy to dig deeper or to testify on a bill or a rule change, because those impede what we're all trying to support, particularly here in terms of agriculture and supporting our students pursuing it and our people actively practicing. So.
Any questions or comments from the board, in person or virtual?
Miguel Lopez. I guess this is the point where I can speak openly, but I've seen this for years, having grown up as the son of immigrants and worked my way to multiple positions in wineries and vineyards. And seeing the same perspective that you guys have seen, I went out and launched a nonprofit a number of years ago, focusing on our energies on taking vineyard stewards, the vineyard workforce, and the curious minds that they have, because there are a lot of them out there, and I'm assuming you guys have the same thing going on here. The ones that are curious to further know more about what they're doing. Yeah, we're told to do this, but what's the reason? What's the technical aspect of it? And we're putting them through a 16-week crash course, from vineyards to winemaking to administrative componentry, and it's bilingual. And so we do it because our workforce is 100% Spanish speaking, and to some extent beyond Spanish speaking, they're dialect speakers. So some of them, their main language is totally foreign to us. And so we need to find somebody that can be the conduit and speak their language and translate in Spanish and so on and so forth. We have seen a high interest in it, but also that continuance of like, well, this is a crash course, essentially. What's next for me? And that's the part that we're needing to connect with. So it sounds like you guys have some similar thing going on here. And it just seems like there's a lot of beautiful effort there. So, good on you guys. That's amazing. Are you seeing within your ag sectors people approaching you, wanting to be part of some program, either through the TVCC or high school kids saying, hey, I want to continue doing this on a regular cycle? Or are you having to pull teeth a little bit?
Chad Cruikshank. When we talk about some of these barriers that you're speaking on behalf of, at the high school level, it becomes, with a pesticide license, the 18 years of age. So we have some age barriers within the tractor safety at 16 years of age. That's kind of the biggest hiccup is, or one of the challenges is the age barriers on some of this. Pointed directly toward those certifications.
Yeah. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I also feel like we live in this area where there's like some kind of amount of stigma, right, for our high school students to go into agriculture. Like they get a ton of pressure in our high schools if they're not in an FFA program, if they're not in an ag program. We don't let those careers, we don't talk about them in the right light, I guess. I think there's really great careers that we know that are out there for our students, but if they're not in Chad's classroom, I'm not sure the average rural community student, if they're not in an ag program, has an opportunity to know about those. Our high school counselors are swamped, and I am not throwing any stones at K-12. Like, please make sure that that's clear. Those folks are doing the good work every day. But when it comes to career advising, they just can't do it all. And we miss a lot of great students that would be really fit. Like there is a place for our hands-on students. Like that's always, I joke that that's who my student is, right? My ideal student is the guy or the kid or the girl that wants to work on their hands and be outside and has some questions and are inquisitive and want to be problem solvers. We don't always deal with those students very well in K-12. Like we don't always know what to do with them. And so it's just about getting them in the right channel. And we have some really cool programs on our campus. The one that always comes to mind is like the HEP and the CAMP program. And they're really like high touch, high intensive advising. Like they make this cohort of students and they're together all the time and their advisors are involved in everything that they do. And there's some financial assistance and just talking about like the barriers of like transportation is huge in our area. And that was before $5 gas and childcare. It's huge, right? And a lot of our students are trying to recreate a career or a new way for their family. And if you have to figure out how to take care of 3 kids and get to class, like that's significant. And childcare is so expensive. So our students, I think at the average community college have a lot more barriers than, especially in really rural areas where we don't have a bus system. And some of those things are just more significant than, but there are programs, but it's often just getting the right people in the room to get those. And our students don't always advocate for themselves. And they don't want to talk about what needs are not being met at home. If I ask my students, they don't tell me that they don't have groceries. They don't tell me they don't have gas, money or whatever. And we have a fund on our campus that our foundation does. And they figure that it's the difference between $500 that can make or break a student's career, right? It is a new set of tires. I mean, and as adults, like $500, like we can budget that in, right, for the average. So it's not a huge deal. But if you are struggling to keep your kids fed, and $500 seems like a pretty insurmountable amount sometimes. So, and there's pots of money, we just talked about them, that we just don't get them in the right places at the right time sometimes.
Barbara Boyer. So the theme's kind of been kids today, or young adults. But I'm curious, with this great resignation happening right now, if you're seeing an uptick in some adults enrolling in some of these vocational classes.
Sandy Porter, TVCC, you bet. Yeah, we have, we just had a gentleman that was, I think, an electrical engineer who was in our natural resources program, right? Did not, I can't remember where he worked for. We looked at his resume for like this class where we call it employment strategies. We're like, man, your resume is better than all of us combined. Like, but he didn't want to be in that grind, and he wanted he and his family to live in kind of a different area. And so he got a sweet job with, I think, Oregon Department, DF&W, and he did not complete his degree with us, but we think he probably got snatched up, right? Hired to a full-time job pretty quickly this summer. But yeah, I can think of a couple, particularly engineers right now that.
Neat.
Yeah, it's great.
And then Dirk, so is your program for adults also?
We haven't done it for adults because we really don't have a program. We just ask, the high school, and that we work together with it. But what I see, and maybe change it a little bit, I see quite a transformation in agriculture. For when I came to the United States 60 years ago, we had the Hispanic population, and they did the irrigating, did this and that. Well, now we go to drip irrigation. We go to, and that's why there is real opportunities now to make a decent living in agriculture. And in those days, they weren't there. It was part-time work in the packing sheds and all that. So the whole idea, when the new generation is, well, look what my dad have done. We got to get away from that, and we have to say, now, agriculture is different. You can have full-time jobs, and you work with equipment that's some of it up to, $250,000. And we need to pay for that. And so, and we have to train those people. And and I think the college just started doing an excellent job in that, so we're not at the P2P. We're only 4 people, and we drink a little beer sometimes, so we waste a little time, but no.
Thank you. And Chad, I've been taking welding classes lately, and I'm really enjoying them as an adult, so I love it. And Shauna, a couple questions for you. How was your board chosen?
It's a 7-member board appointed by the governor.
Oh, okay. Interesting. And don't invest in any grease and keep your wheels squeaky, please.
I'm stubborn, if nothing else.
Yeah, so our virtual board members, Dean Simonich, any questions or comments before we switch to public comment?
No additional things from me. Thank you.
Well, excellent. Well, we sure appreciate the panel here. That was a pretty fun conversation, actually, a lot of back and forth. So, yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
You're welcome. I know. Yeah.
I was gonna crack the joke of like this Rhode Island fire technician get to work. I jump back there.
I know.
If do, I'm in.
Hot shots.
I'm in.
Okay, we have plenty here. I just don't want you to feel like you have to take him.
I think I'm definitely.
Here. Okay. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
What is this population? Labor drag out here.
Very high. We include there is a statement in our K through 12.
All right, it's 2:30, so we do have one public comment virtually. So it is Mary Ann Cooper. There you are.
Hello, I can unfortunately see myself on the big screen behind you, so apologies to those of you that I'm more than life-sized for. Chair Harper and members of the board, thank you so much for the opportunity to provide public comment. I wanted to speak on a few different things, so I'll try to keep it brief. Initially, as it relates to some of the resolutions that were discussed last night, I just wanted to kind of reiterate our comments on the climate change and how ODA engages around some of the climate work. I absolutely think it is important and critical to have support for efforts like the Climate Smart Grant in that resolution, but would really encourage the board to also maintain some of the emphasis around cost control and cost protection for producers, because there is still kind of a global conversation happening around how the state meets its climate goals, and things like the Climate Protection Program are very much a part of that. And so I don't want to lose that piece from the resolution, as you all kind of also update some of the incentives work that is, I think, really important that ODA is doing and that we fully support. So that is on the climate one. On food safety, we appreciated the discussion last night, and we appreciate all of the work that's being put into that resolution. But we wanted to say that while we appreciate the efforts to promote outreach, education, and technical assistance, we do still want to encourage the department to go a step further and take the steps necessary to allow Oregon to join the 45 other states that do directly do these inspections. We think that's an important piece for our producers and something that they've been asking for a while. So we just wanted to say we appreciate the additional emphasis on education and outreach, but would like to still see ODA step into that role directly. And finally, I think kind of the main point of my comments today, we had sent a letter and engaged with a lot of staff around the direction of the pesticide stewardship partnership, and sent a letter to Director Taylor and Director Whitman about concerns around that the direction of the PSP work, particularly as it relates to the data viewer that the agencies have been moving forward and is now available for public outreach. We believe it seriously mischaracterizes the data, and I think will undermine producer support and willingness to participate in the program. We encourage the agency to pull that back, take another look at it, and continue to engage with partners around it, because it's going to be problematic for producers, and I think it is impacting our overall support for the program, and that's something that I think will play out in the upcoming legislative discussion and budget discussions. And I will say relatedly, while we have major concerns with how PSP is handled, at the same time, the department is asking for more fees from registrants when those concerns that registrants and producers that I represent are raising are not being listened to and not being heard. So it feels like on one hand, the department's asking for additional money effectively from producers for those programs, but on the other hand, not engaging with those producers and listening to and responding to, I think, some pretty serious feedback that we have related to the direction, particularly of the PSP. So wanted to make sure to get that in front of the board. I'm happy to share out the letter that we sent if that hasn't already been shared with you all. But we'd ask that the board have a pretty serious conversation about PSP, the direction of PSP, and particularly how we can meet the goals of increased public transparency without risking kind of misleading information about the program being pretty readily put into the hands of advocates who have already been using similar data to advocate for further restrictions on important crop production tools that Oregon producers need. So we would encourage the board to get engaged in that conversation, especially again, as it relates to the department, while at the same time asking for increased fees from registrants. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has, and can get the letter to Carla to share out with you all directly if you don't have it.
Gila Miller, just a question. For those of us who may not know PSP well, could we have a little time at our next meeting so we could kind of dive in and understand what the issues might be? Great, thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Marianne.
So Barbara Boyer, before we move on, I know you mentioned it early on, Elin, but I also feel like maybe this would be the time to mention we did receive 2 public comments, so it's under our number 4 agenda item from Trout Unlimited and Oregon Environmental Council. I feel like that's kind of, it should be mentioned in this section. So thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, well, up next, we have no more public comment, so we have a break that starts at 2:45, but since we have no more public comment, we'll just start our break early and come back at 3 o'clock.
It was 10. Yeah, I think it was 10.
Yeah.
Like I told
Huh?
That's why I left early.
Oh, no.
No, nothing.
No, they kicked us out shortly after everybody left.
Bar closed at 10.
They really shut down at 10.
Just that part. Oh, yeah.
Jeez, man.
Really? Oh.
Yeah. All right, so it's just after 3. We're on to agenda item 5, which is regional economic development programs. And we have Shauna Peterson back. And we have Courtney Warner Crowell, and then Grant Kitamura. And Shauna, you're up first.
Carla has a brief PowerPoint. She's ready to cue that up. By way of introduction, again, I'm Shauna Peterson, Executive Director of the Eastern Oregon Border Board. The Border Board was created, and you can go to that first slide, Carla, in 2017 by a bill co-sponsored by then Speaker Tina Kotek and then Representative Cliff Bentz. In this area, we had a rather catastrophic winter with a once-in-a-lifetime or once-in-a-many-lifetime snow event that exacerbated and really shone a spotlight on the relative disparities between Idaho and Oregon. Boise, Idaho is one of the fastest growing metros, and it's extending out this way because we're under an hour away. And we, on this little sliver of Oregon that is depicted on the next slide, have some of the things that plague rural agriculture-based towns with, relatively low levels of advanced education, a little bit of poverty beyond what you'd like to see. It really exacerbated because in that winter we lost a lot of ag facilities, warehouses, onion sheds, and many of those businesses who had an opportunity to rebuild, hopefully on insurance dime, relocated to Idaho. And that was rather devastating. So it shone on spotlight. And the silver lining that came out of that was the creation of the Border Board. We were charged with advocating for policy and legislative changes that would better the economic status of our region, and armed with $5 million to stand up programs to do it in a variety of grant, loan, and incentive programs. Our focus has been in the beginning, and the next slide talks about this a bit, on what are the root causes, because we don't want to just throw money at something that it's not going to fix it. We fortunately applied for a grant from a program called Data Science for the Public Good. We were assigned a PhD student and some undergraduate students who took direction from us on what hard data we wanted and needed. And so the anecdotal information that we were able to garner from industry, from everything from Grant to Courtney to educational institutions in the region, we wanted to put some numbers behind. And so this Data Science for the Public Good project let us do that on a grant. We're pretty excited about leveraging our $5 million. We've only spent about $2 million of it, but we've infused more than double that in the region by virtue of having spent it. The next slide will help you understand the plight of the region. On the Ontario side of the border, so the Oregon side of the border, we've seen population decline. On the Idaho side of the border, Fruitland is the nearest town, we've seen it increase. On the next slide, you can see the poverty levels. Poverty has gone down on both sides of the river, or it's gone down on the Oregon side of the river a bit. It's still way, way too high. On the Idaho side, it's gone up, but that's probably within a margin of error, and you can see the discrepancy. Unemployment's roughly similar. Another project on the next slide that we had Data Science for the Public Good look at was building. Housing and availability of workforce has been a recurring theme as we've tried to discern what we might want to infuse some of this money into. And the relative growth is, I mean, you can see it with your eyes, but basically on the Idaho side, the growth is 10 times more for residential. So we're really stagnant, and that results in a stagnant kind of social poverty in addition to economic poverty, while the contrast is really heightened by it being rather thriving on the other side of the river. Another thing that I have focused on as a border board in the next slide, we were able to get some empirical data to support, was a bit of a licensure barrier. Idaho prides itself on being, you know, really minimal government. Everything's kind of easy. They succeed with it somewhat because it's pretty small. The growth is starting to prove challenging. Their lax land use is starting to catch up because we've got a little bit of a crazy quilter patchwork. I'm an attorney by day, and a lot of my ag clients share stories where on the Idaho side, they're starting to have trouble with insurance because they are taking big equipment through what's now subdivisions or much busier roads than they used to be, and insurers are passing on the cost of the claims that are coming up because it's not the Idaho it used to be when there was a lot less traffic, for example. But all that is to say that we did identify that it's barrier to employment. It's a bit of a barrier to business and growth when licensure is a little more strenuous, more expensive, a little harder. The last thing that we had data science for the public good look at is reflected on the next slide. And this is empirically backed in the sense that there are real life studies that talk about education and healthcare and quality of life data. And fair or not, I don't love it because I am a proud resident of Ontario, Oregon. But there is a very strong perception that life is better across the river. And so we're fighting that too, in terms of perception and kind of marketing campaign-ish. So armed with that information, we started the first full session of the legislature after our board was seated was in 2019. If you even want to plug ahead to the next slide, one bill that you'll appreciate because you work with government, and I am embracing government. I am a very much private industry, private practice attorney. I do tax and estate work and some ag business work. So it's been a learning curve while I learn patience. But one thing that we tackled, and again, we've had excellent partners at the state level from the governor's office to both parties in the legislature, originally drafted the bill. The Department of Justice interpreted that workforce development was one of our charges, and economic development in general, but that by definition didn't include housing. And that was really one of the biggest things that we discovered was an impediment to economic development. So we passed a bill in the 2019 legislature that for purposes of the border board, housing is economic development. The next bill was a little less of a housekeeping, and we weren't able to pass that, but that was a rather sweeping effort to try to address this licensure barrier issue where we advocated for provisional licensure to allow someone, once they met a basic level that ensured safety and qualifications, to be licensed and work while they attained full licensure in Oregon. It was a tough fight. We advanced a similar bill in 21 that also didn't pass. This next session will probably keep up the fight, but it might be more tailored by particular licensing category, because when it's this type of sweeping bill, everybody's hackles go up from mostly organized labor, but you know, the nursing, the electrical, all the unions get a little worried when you start to undermine. Never would we compromise quality, but we'll try it again in a new tactic because we do think it's still a problem that affects our agricultural industry and all economic development in the region. The next bill passed, and that one back in 2019 was meant to address a shortage, especially in career and technical education and some of the harder to fill K-12 education positions like math and science. This is kind of a rural bill, but it also was a problem highlighted by our proximity to Idaho because in Idaho, you could, for example, hire a certified nursing assistant instructor who was qualified by virtue of being an RN. And then the entity hiring, whether it's a high school or an educational service district, could screen for whether they're going to be a good teacher and, you know, had a clean background check and all those things. On the Oregon side, for that equivalent position, the person had to be an RN, had to have 5 years in hospital experience, 5 years skilled nursing or like nursing home experience. Those people are either retired or in really high paying, you know, hospital system jobs. And so we couldn't fill that to train our CNAs. So we advanced a bill to help make that a little bit easier. The next session, if you want to click through, we passed a couple bills. We gained some ground with the legislature. I think we've developed a strong reputation for doing our homework and having sensible bills. This one was meant to address a workforce issue in the region where we import a disproportionate amount of our workforce. The kind of glaring example is the really large prison, Oregon's largest, that's just outside Ontario. Over 75% of the well-paid, educated employees that work out there live in Idaho. And so our schools don't have their children as students, our civic organizations don't have them as members. You know, the worse than just it being a kind of crummy way to run a business, it's had some socially and growth-related issues. So we advanced a bill that was modeled after the veterans' preference that for government jobs in the border region, you get preference. You could opt out of it if you chose. Generally, you probably wouldn't choose to, but you get preference if you reside in Malheur County. Employers really embrace that. We did a good job educating and helping them write policies to do it. And it doesn't supplant qualifications-based hiring, but it gives a little edge to people who want to be part of our community and work here. The next couple slides explain that. I spoke to it, so I won't bore you with looking at it, but certainly you're welcome to look at it in your packets. I'm blowing through this just to make sure we cover everything, but hopefully you find the resources useful. I said we import a disproportionate amount of our workforce. This is a slide created by the Data Science for the Public Good team, and it shows that. So of about the 14,000 people who work in Malheur County, you can see that more than half of it come from Idaho. And in a healthy community, that number is a lot less dramatic. So as a board, we're pretty committed to advancing things and funding things that help ameliorate that problem. The next bill was, and you'll click through two for this one. This is Senate Bill 16. And as people vested in the, I'm sorry. I think I skipped through one on you there. Well, actually, you're fine. I'm messing you up. I'm sorry. If you just go one more, that's the summary of the passage of the bill I just described. This one, I spoke to how important it was to the border board to be able to advance some of our incentive programs for housing. And I'll talk about one in particular that you might think is as cool as I do, or hopefully you do. But here is a slide that shows you how things are going in terms of residential construction on the Idaho side and the Oregon side of our little tiny pocket. The short, really stagnant column is all of Malheur County, not just the border region, and we're a huge county, although the population is obviously more localized. The other is Idaho. 21 numbers I have final. I just haven't updated the slide, but it's even worse. So what we did was look into the why, and of course I've addressed a lot of that, livability, all sorts of things, perception, a bit of a problem. But one thing that really emerged as well was a strong desire for people to have like their own little slice of heaven in the form of a ranchette. And in Idaho, that's pretty easy. You can pop up a house on an acre or 2 or 5 or 10. In Oregon, for good reason, you can't. And we had an idea where the Board had an idea and advanced a bill in the 19 session and again in the 21 session to make that doable, but on doing it the Oregon way that made sense, that didn't cut off what is incredibly important to the Board and the region, and that is our agricultural base. So we advanced Senate Bill 16. I couldn't be prouder to say that it passed. Really a challenging one, but I think it passed on its merits, and I think that says something for the work of the board, rather than it being a politicized issue or a no, you can't build in the country type of issue. So all told, I spent a little time on this in the slideshow just because I thought it might be of interest to the Board of Agriculture, but basically it builds in a lot of protections that mean it's not farmable ground. It's not going to impair farming around it, but it does allow people, often family members of farm people or people like me who have a handful of goats at home, to have a little bit of that dream, even though I have no business owning more than a couple acres. The next couple of slides talk about it a bit more, and the process and the how it works. But now we're in the implementation phase. The bill simply allowed the county to create a process for rezoning EFU or exclusive farm use to rural residential, and now we're carefully implementing that. Other advocacy that we've done are things like this, informing the Board of Agriculture and any other group that will invite us to speak about what we're doing, because we're a really unique entity. And then last but not least, I wanted to give you a little information about the programs the board stood up. I told you we created 10 with our first $5 million. The new $6 million is just about to land in our account. And so we're actually standing up new programs for that. And we are all ears if you have some great ideas. But so far, the programs that we have stood up are all with the goal of enhancing prosperity in the border region, improving the tax base, improving our competitiveness with Idaho, increasing workforce skills and availability, the image and perception issues I spoke to. And then I also said we're a little greedy, so everything we do, we try to leverage outside funds, and we've been pretty successful at it. The next slide just depicts how we allocated that among the 10 programs, and maybe more thought than the legislature ever contemplated would be spent on doing this was spent. We are a very deliberate board, and it's taken us quite a bit of time. There were no strings where we could have spent the full $5 million on one project and said, oh, our board has disbanded, or now we'll just take on this policy work and no more spending work. But we've been really diligent about trying to fill these needs and achieve some results. One exciting program described on the next slide that's been our most popular is a competitive housing incentive program, and that underlines again why it was so important we had permission to invest in housing. Basically, if you'll build a house in the border region, we'll pay you $21,000. And so obviously it's been popular, but those numbers weren't just pulled out of a hat. The numbers were designed to offset. It's a little cheaper to build in Idaho because the regulations are a little more lax, so permitting and things like that. The houses don't seem to be falling down over there. My parents live in Fruitland, and I grew up in Idaho, if I'm to confess. But there is a little bit of added expense, a perception of added expense. So the first $6,000 is meant to combat that. In Idaho, there's also a homeowner's exemption where you get a little break on your property taxes up to the first $150,000 in value. So we created a $1,500 per year incentive that will pay, and it's kind of meant to equalize and then add a little bonus on top of if you did the same thing in Idaho. You saw the numbers earlier on the slide where there would only be like 20 some homes in a year in all of Malheur County. Just in the border region, in a year and a half since the competitive housing incentive program opened, we've approved 37 new homes. So it has been wildly successful. We're excited about that. The next one is similar, and that's on the next slide. It's a property improvement rebate program. We have some dilapidated properties, and we have seen a little bit of a commercial boom in marijuana dispensaries, but nothing else. And that's because Idaho doesn't have them. If there's any economic edge that the border region has, it would be pot. But and so that's actually excluded from our programs. One, because of the federal regulations, and then two, because that's not a disadvantage as far as building in that. But this program, basically, if you'll improve your the tax assessed value of an existing property or new commercial, existing residential or new or existing commercial, will give you a 15% rebate by however much you bettered our tax rolls by. So kind of innovative and exciting, and it's been popular. This one came online more recently, so I think we only have 3 so far, but it's because the trigger to qualifying is that your property is reassessed, and usually you want that to get pushed out as long as possible. So as they're getting reassessed and up on the tax rolls, we'll see an increase in participation. The next 2 programs I talked about a little bit when we met earlier today, but they all fall in workforce development or good idea type things. So if you look at the next few slides, you'll see we have education and workforce training grant, an EDGE grant, it's a smallish one, 25,000, but it's basically good ideas. So you may well have contacts in the region who have a good idea, who just need a little bit of funding, and that's us. Community improvement planning grants, less exciting, but it is meant to help get like parks plans in place. The airport master plan, we were able to support with some money, and now the BLM base is going to be here. So we've been able to do some neat things. Most of it having a lot of overlap with agriculture, because obviously that's a priority, and it again is the main driver of the economy in this part of Oregon. So to keep it at my time allotment, I could talk to you all day about everything we've learned and tried to do and everything we look forward to do. So please reach out if you have any questions. The Border Board has a website that's on the last slide, and you could certainly find more information there. But basically, we're getting ready to figure out how to invest the next $6 million and the rest of our original appropriation and continue to deliver results.
Miguel Lopez. So with all this information, thank you very much, by the way. Have you guys had any developers approach you to see if they can work something out? I mean, 37 houses, that's amazing. That's great. I live in Carlton in the Valley. They just slammed in a 72 house unit 2 streets over from my neighborhood. And it's like, holy cow. And that's in one go. So I just wondering, like, if you're competing with Idaho across the way, is there a way to bring a developer in that could attract it and sell it in a way, or have you had that?
We have been in conversation with developers. We have another program that's in the packet, but I didn't speak to, and it's a loan program, but it's like 0 or 1% money designed to attract developers to offset the cost of building that infrastructure for even a 20 house neighborhood, because it's all the scale here, of course. But there's a lot of upfront expense for a builder, and they know on the Idaho side they can sell them a little faster is the feedback we're getting. So that's why we stood up a program to make it not cost them. They're not sitting on these lots. And so that's why the 0 or 1% money while they do it. Right now, those programs, I think it's been, and it was unanticipated, but with building costs going up so much, and then demand on the Idaho side, which has still just been growing like crazy, we're having trouble attracting builders. For example, I needed some concrete work, and at my personal residence, I can't get anyone who's licensed in Oregon to take the project because they're all licensed in Idaho, not over here. So we're running into some barriers like that we're working on other ways to address. Short answer, though, is we have been trying to reach out to developers saying, what's preventing you from standing up this over here and trying to put up programs that make it doable. Right now, they're simply busy enough or don't have enough framers or this or that to expand much, but we're not going to stop pushing on for it.
Thank you, Barbara Boyer. Has there been an inventory of vacant houses done?
Yes. So I could not tell you those numbers off the top of my head, but that was actually part of the data science for the public good. So we did stand up a program for that too. We looked at vacant, and then we looked at non-owner occupied, a little bit dilapidated. We have a bit of blight, and that tends to encourage more blight rather than attract new or non-blight. We don't have a lot of vacancy, but the blight seemed to be the bigger problem, or undervalued homes. So that's why we stood up that property improvement program, where if you we have two. We have a 0% loan where if you do some aesthetic improvements to your home, we'll give you 0% money for 5 years. And then the other one is if you make improvements to your home that improve your tax assessment, we'll give you 15% of it back. But vacancy hasn't been too much of a problem. We've tried to address the rundownness through those other two programs.
Can I ask another? Okay. You had talked about groundwater limited areas. How many do you have in the border region?
So the border board just gave a new grant to the county planning department to do all of that work. And I don't think we have the report back yet, so I don't know.
I think that would be an important report before building happens.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. And that's why you see it built into that. That property couldn't get rezoned if it was.
And then, you know, I think about land use a lot as a farmer. And, you know, there is the non-farm dwelling option on EFU land. So, you know, if it's in real high demand, that is something that you could look into.
The Malheur County situation, when I first started practicing here, because I'm a lawyer too, used to be you go to the planning office and the answer is just going to be no matter what, even if it fits within some very reasonable things. There's been an evolution in that office. They've had a great team for several years, and the border board gave a grant, a separate grant than the one I just mentioned, to the planning department to help facilitate that. I've helped a number of clients through non-farm use, selling conditional use permits. Now with the accessory dwelling law, that won't do much here, but you know, it's kind of more of like a Bend thing. But we've funded some, because these budgets are kind of finite, and so the border board is funded to help people navigate that sort of thing. Our goal as the border board is it shouldn't take me for a landowner to get that done. And it's pretty complicated for the average bear to navigate some of those approval processes. And so we haven't launched any programs like that, but we've given money to the county to support making it a little more user friendly, because there are avenues and we always encourage people to go through those. It's not a hard no. You can build in Oregon. What we run into is it is so much, it's a hassle factor. It's not that you couldn't do it here in some instances. It's so much easier and the red carpet's rolled out. Relatively speaking, in Idaho. But that doesn't have to be the case, and it's certainly not the tone currently. And I feel like we've had excellent support at the county, state level. It's perception is a bit of a problem that we're trying to overcome too, where people just think, oh, I can't, you know, where are they, you know.
So education could be one of your components of this.
And that was what some of that funding was, exactly. Navigators, education, facts.
Miguel Lopez, staying on the same bandwidth, Barbara brings up a really good question. Are the towns within the border region, can they sustain or support more housing through their current septic systems, sewer systems, garbage, and water and light? Like,
yes.
Is that something they can handle?
So those are excellent questions. And like I said, if nothing else, the border board is incredibly deliberate. We're not just throwing things out without looking at the downstream effect. We awarded a grant to the city of Nyssa for a wastewater project, and then some of the federal money that came out further supported some wastewater and other things. There are only 3 incorporated cities in the border region, and they're all really tremendous partners and in ongoing discussions, whether at the county or those 3 city levels. So short answer is yes, but it's always something we have to be mindful of. They're pretty eager and have eagerly partnered, as has the college and every other entity. They're having hiring problems because people, even who want to live here, can't find housing. So it's all been everybody kind of singing the same tune so far.
We can't find housing anywhere in the state.
Or afford it if you can find it. Like I said, when we first started, it wasn't this building costs. It's evolved.
All right, Courtney, you're next.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Well, thank you for having me today. I am Courtney Warner Kroll. I am the Regional Solutions Coordinator for Eastern Oregon for the Governor's Office, as well as the Governor's Water Policy Advisor. So I think I'm here today to talk a little bit about regional solutions and sort of economic development in Eastern Oregon. So I'll give you a little bit of background on Regional Solutions. It's a program that's kind of housed within the Governor's Office, but really is a collaborative program around economic and community development within our state agencies. So we are based, so we have sort of coordinators like me that are based throughout the state. I live over in Baker County, but cover about 10 counties in Eastern Oregon. And we are kind of regionally based on the federal economic development districts. So I actually have 2 regions in Eastern Oregon. I have Northeast Oregon, which is Baker, Union, Wallowa, and then Greater Eastern, which is my 7 other ones: Grant, Malheur, Harney, Gillum, Wheeler, Morrow, Umatilla. So, and we work, I work with a team of sort of state agency partners, primarily in statute. Those are Business Oregon, Department of Transportation, DEQ, DLCD, and Oregon Housing and Community Services. So I kind of have team members in each of those agencies that work closely with me on economic and community development projects across the region. But we also pull in many partners from ODA, from Water Resources, ODF&W, whatever the project sort of entails, we kind of pull in our state agency partners. And really, we're just here to help communities, organizations, businesses who are working on economic or community development projects. And we try and help them navigate sort of the various either financial needs in terms of trying to find financing through our state or federal agencies, our permitting or regulatory challenges in terms of making sure that a community that wants to do a wastewater system upgrade, they don't have to go to Department of State Lands and figure something out and then be told, oh, you've got to go over to DEQ, to then be told you got to go over to DLCD. We try and bring everyone in sort of early on to try and streamline regulations. The governor likes to talk about us running with scissors and being able to sort of cut red tape. We can't actually cut red tape, but we can try and kind of just increase communication and smooth things out. And in terms of kind of how we sort of work with our local partners as well. We, in addition to sort of those state agency teams, we have regional solutions advisory committees. And so each region, so I have 2, I have 2 committees that are made up of business, elected leaders, philanthropy, community-based organizations, who am I forgetting? Cities and counties. So I have kind of local stakeholders who help kind of identify what are the regional economic priorities of each region. And they also help if we do get sort of funding from the legislature to help prioritize capital infrastructure projects. So in Eastern Oregon, I've got, like I said, I've got 2 advisory committees, but our priorities tend to be relatively the same. We've got everything from natural resource utilization to broadband to enhancing local infrastructure and improving industrial land readiness, to renewable energy development. Childcare is kind of a new priority that we've identified. Workforce availability, food security has actually been a new one, which I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. And then, and water security is also kind of a big thing out here in Eastern Oregon. So I thought I would maybe kind of highlight a few projects that we're working on as sort of regional solutions to kind of highlight some of the economic development issues or kind of projects around Eastern Oregon. And so I will not include Malheur County because we've got sort of Malheur County experts here. But I will, one of them that I wanted to focus on that also have sort of a ag or natural resource connection is the Wallowa Lake Dam. So Regional Solutions has been very involved with this project sort of from the beginning. It's a dam that has been rated high hazard. It was built in 1919, I believe. And because, and it's privately owned by an 6 different ditch companies, but they have come together to form the Wallowa Lake Irrigation District. And they, due to the high hazard level, they have not been able to sort of fill to the top of that lake since like the 70s. And so by being able to rehab the dam, we will be able to sort of increase the water for both agriculture and fish. So that has been sort of a really big project. That project has received $14 million in lottery bonds from the legislature. We had to go twice because COVID sort of impacted that lottery bond, that sale that first time, as I'm sure you guys have probably heard. But I think those funds are going through. Regional Solutions has helped kind of the navigation of that funding, as well as we've brought all those stakeholders together. And those stakeholders include the irrigation district, and then we've got 2 tribes. We've got the Nez Perce tribe and the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, as well as Water Resources and ODF&W. So that sort of stakeholder group, we've been sort of facilitating both the memorandum of agreement around the in-stream water rights. So now we will be dedicating water in the Wallowa River for fish year-round. It has been sort of agreed upon. And as well as now we are having discussions around what fish passage, because there's no fish passage and hasn't been for over 100 years. So we're partnering with the tribes and our state and federal agencies around, this is really the opportunity for sockeye to once again get back into Wallowa River. So it's a huge opportunity, or Wallowa Lake. So it's a huge opportunity around natural resource ecosystem, as well as a huge increase for the ag base up there that will allow this water to be used sort of downstream. We've also identified a few sort of water sharing components that will really help downstream irrigators, as well as sort of the upstream Wallowa Lake folks. So that's kind of a big project that we're still working through. I will say, due to the cost escalation, I think the project went from about 16 million 4 or 5 years ago to, I think we're almost at 30 million. So we are looking at sort of all of those federal infrastructure opportunities to kind of fill that gap, as well as working with our traditional funders. Another big project that we have just recently sort of engaged with is the reopening of the Prairie Wood Products over in Prairie City. You guys might have heard about that. We haven't actually reopened a lumber mill in Eastern Oregon in a very long time. So we're pretty excited. It's a D.R. Johnson property that hasn't been in operation since 2009. So with sort of the increased housing costs and sort of the market opportunities, they really feel it's an opportunity to reopen a mill. So Business Oregon and DEQ have been working closely with that company to try and identify both sort of the infrastructure needs, like water and wastewater systems, and as well as permitting, because now we have Clean Air Oregon and other sort of new regulatory operations that they'll have to abide by, as well as Business Oregon's been helping with some of the financing needs there. So that's kind of a new exciting one. And then, we also sort of deal with emergencies and issues that sort of come up, disaster-related things, which kind of fall more under community development. Like right now, I'm working on, last week, there was a huge hailstorm up in Wallowa, and so there was a ton of damage, and so we're kind of working on trying to help that community rebuild, as well as one big issue, which you guys have probably heard about, is the sort of drinking water situation in the LGWAMA, the Lower Umatilla Groundwater Area Management Area. Morrow County issued a state or emergency declaration related to high nitrates in drinking water in domestic wells. In Morrow County, there's been a huge effort to kind of do additional testing. This is a problem that's been happening for 30 years. It's going to take us a long time to get out. But currently we are kind of pulling all of the local, state, and federal partners together to identify how we can address those issues sort of on the ground right now. So how do we kind of set up the systems for long-term education, outreach, and testing of those domestic well owners, and just sort of educating domestic well owners on what they need to do, what high nitrates mean. You can't just boil water, things like that, as well as trying to find some funding for actual filtration systems to get people clean water. The state has been sort of active in providing emergency water to folks, but we also need to kind of address the long-term solutions or long-term issues and find some solutions. And then I think I talked about sort of food security. One thing I just wanted to flag, and this is something that has come up through my regional solutions advisory committees, is, as you know, a lack of meat processing facilities in Eastern Oregon. So we have been sort of over the past, I'd say, year and a half, we as regional solutions have been trying to kind of facilitate some discussions and roundtables with industry and state agency partners and producers around what are really the barriers to meat processing. We're very excited about the state meat inspection program and the opportunities that ODA has now for our little folks, but it's also just trying to get, business planning and things for meat processing facilities to start up out here and trying to kind of figure out. It's an ongoing issue, and I think we will continue to kind of see challenges, but it's really an area that our regional solutions advisory committee really identified as a need, especially through COVID, with the need for more locally sourced and locally processed meat. So those are just kind of a few projects that are going on. I'm happy to take any questions on what else is going on. Anything else you guys have?
I just wanted to add on the Lubguama nitrate issue. The board may remember in our 21-23 budget, we had an ask and received some funding that was really a pass through to help some facilitation around this issue in the agriculture community, identify where the data is, where the gaps are. And so that's in process in that region as well. And so I just wanted to call that out for the board.
Yeah, and I should say, thank you, Director Taylor. I should say there's both sort of this short term, like how do we address this, the acute need right now to help people get clean water in those counties, the domestic wells in those counties, but also there's a whole long-term Lubguama group that is trying to address those long-term issues that Alexis was mentioning.
Excellent. Well, we are getting close to that 3:45 departure time, but want to definitely let Grant speak.
That's the talk of the bus.
Yeah.
Okay, well, to begin with, I want to thank you all for coming to Ontario and welcome you, if no one's welcomed you thus far, to my home. And although I have moved to Idaho, it's not very, we're not very far. And I'm near her in-laws. We're neighbors, so they were here as well. But again, it's good to see all of you, and feels like old home week. And thank you very much for having me. I'm Grant Kitamura, for those of you who may not know, and I'm a managing partner in Baker and Murakami Produce, an onion packing facility that we're going to tour later. And I also serve, since I'm no longer on the Ag Board, I serve as the president of Malheur County Development Corporation, which is the entity responsible for building our transload facility here in Malheur County, and I'll get into that. But first, I'll give you a little recap on Malheur County. Malheur County is a very sparsely populated state or county, and it's not very, it's poor. It may be the poorest county, isn't it?
We jostle.
We jostle?
One
Okay.
of is always safe to say.
So Malheur County is probably almost 10,000 square miles, maybe 29,000 to 30,000 people. Most of them are right up here in the 3 towns of Ontario, Vale, and Nissa. So it's very sparsely populated, like say about 30,000 people, probably 240,000 head of cattle, and about 10 to 11 to 13,000 acres of onions. And so I'm gonna dwell on the onion deal. That's all I know. But there's 180,000 acres of irrigated land in Malheur County. 11 to 12,000, 13,000 are onions traditionally, and there's other forage crops. 100,000 acres of forage crops to feed the cattle. But not very many row crops. There's sugar beets, some mint, potatoes, but very few. Anyhow, this is the thing going back and forth with beef and onions for the lead commodity. Of course, agriculture is the backbone of Malheur County, and I think beef has had the lead for quite some time here in the last few years. I've been in my industry for 42 years, and it used to be they'd go back and forth, but beef has taken the lead. But They're not counting it right. They're not keeping track of it right. We have onions at farm gate. It means when they leave the farm, right? But they go to sheds, local sheds, and they get more added value. And I added that packing cost or charge in there, and they've got it down at $73 million of farm gate. It's probably 133 million. Okay. Now the cattle, when they go butchered, like talking about, they get out of here. They're out of here. They're not in Malheur County. And so, but we have added value here in Malheur County with onion packing. So we're a very valuable industry. Anyhow, like I said, I've made my livelihood doing that. We're with Idaho, Southwest Idaho, in a marketing order, and we have mandatory inspection. There's a total of 23,000 acres of onions annually, which provides about 40% of the national consumption between September and April. So it's a major onion growing area across the nation. People recognize Idaho Spanish onions from Idaho, Oregon. So it's a big deal in the vegetable world, and we're pretty proud of that. We have funding through a marketing order. We do promotion, research, and some export promotion. And we go to these conventions. They recognize our brands and our products. So, and they're very large onions. And it's unfortunate that our growing season wasn't very good. It was a poor start and a very hot summer again. And I plan to have you tour the shed when it was running onions. We won't have any in there until tomorrow morning. Now, if you want to go by tomorrow morning when you leave, well, you're welcome to it. Okay. Anyhow, 23,000 acres of onions create about 35,000 loads of outbound product once it's packaged. So we have a good recovery. There's about 25 shippers in the valley, Idaho and Oregon, and maybe 100 to 120 growers. And it's here to stay. The only problem we've had, the real problem we've had, of course, with the increase of expenses is transportation. When you live in a place where there aren't very many people, you don't have trucks coming to town to unload. So they have to come from the different cities, whether it's Salt Lake, Seattle, Portland, come here to load to ship out. And we ship to every state in the United States. Some export, not as many as we used to. But that's why years ago, 6 years ago, I believe, Cliff Bentz, our local state representative at the time, brought a bunch of his friends from Salem out here, including Tina Kotek and many others. There were quite a few. And we told them about our plight. We raise beautiful onions. We have trouble getting them out of here. There's rail and truck. There aren't enough trucks or truck drivers, whatever the cause may be. And we just really get in a bind at times and start paying excessive amounts of freight to have these trucks show up in Ontario and Nissa and Vail to load out of here. And so we did a good job reaching across the aisle, because in 2017, House Bill 2017 too, with the transportation package, there was $26 million in that package for us to build a facility for that. And somehow I was made president, and I wouldn't say elected, I was made president, and we've had a good core group of board members for all this time. It's been almost 5 years. Now the facility, I don't know, did you drive by it, Keith?
We did. No.
You didn't? Okay. I think they're starting to lay tracks out there finally. But between, there's so many issues with this, what was going on. We were working with RailX out of Wallula. They have the ideal situation, and they were going to work or manage this facility for us. In the meantime, this was 5 years ago, remember, about 4 years ago, they sold their facility to the Union Pacific. And then, so we start working with the Union Pacific. Then they shut it down a year later. So we have no one to work with. Well, we came up with another company, Americold, largest food transportation and storage company in the United States. And we're working with them. Now we got someone to handle our product. We're moving forward. And then the inflation thing, right? We have $26 million. Seemed like plenty of money at the time. It's not enough. So we went back and we're begging. Maybe go beg Shawnee here pretty soon. We begged Courtney already, and somehow she must have talked to the governor because she's helping us out. So I think we see the light at the end of the tunnel. I think we'll have it completed by next late winter or spring and probably be able to ship in the fall of 23. And to explain what it is, I don't know if you've heard about it. It's a bimodal situation where you load rail cars, ship to transload points back east, near Chicago, near New York, transload on the trucks and deliver to truck customers, if that makes sense. See, the trouble with rail, when you ship rail, the only places it'll go, normally terminal markets, the big handlers who ship out and mark up, which is fine. That's a way of doing business. That's about 20% of our business that way. 80% is by trucks. And the trucks are short. And the fuel prices, so now everything even looks better, more rosy for our facility. And we're very glad that we have it or will have it. It'll keep us in the ball game. It'll keep our industry alive. It'll keep our commodity that's grown here in the markets. It'll keep the value of our investments good, solid, hopefully here. And we just can't wait to get it done. I'll tell you right now, when I started on that project, my hair was black. And look what's happened. At any rate, we hope to see it done and come to fruition. And to give you an idea, I asked my transportation department today, so what's it cost to ship a bag of onions or a truckload of onions to New York City? The freight is $10 per bag. New York City, 50-pound bag. What's it cost to go to New York City by rail? $6.13. So if we go to a different terminal, put them on trucks, it's not going to cost $4. Get it to the destination. There's going to be, you will have a better market share, and we'll be able to beat out our competition in Washington and California and other places. So we're looking forward to that. Another example is Ontario to Chicago, another major receiving area. Truck rate is $6 per bag. Rail rate is $3.43. So we're going to get a hybrid method here. The rate's it's going to be somewhere between the two, but it'll give us an advantage.
These 50-pound bags?
50-pound bag equivalents, you know. And a rail car holds 3,600 bags. Can you believe that? And a truck holds about 840. But no, and rail is 4.5 times more efficient than truck, fuel ton miles. So we're greener and make a world of difference, you know. But that's about all I have. I'm trying to keep it short for you. If you have questions, you can ask me now. You can ask me later. We can go to the shed. And this shed, I'll give you a little preview of it. It's much like what Dirk talked about when he went to the Netherlands to see automation. That's what we have. And that's we combined the forces. I was originally Murakami Produce for the last, well, about 37 years. And I merged with another shed in town, Baker Packing, who was there probably that long as well. And together we could afford to build this facility and buy the equipment with the help of Andy Savati. So we're all connected here, okay? We're all connected here. With only 29,000 people and 10,000 square miles, you know, we all know each other. And so you'll see that facility and you'll have to imagine it moving. Do you have any questions? Oh, like I say, if you think of any, feel free to ask anytime.
Well, excellent. Sure appreciate it and your time. And we are definitely, Mr. Chair did not do a very good job today of keeping us on schedule for the latter second half of today's board meeting. But I guess, yeah, we'll go from here. We'll load up and head out for our next tour.
Yeah, maybe not if you have electronics, maybe not, but your materials.
when we go back.